Silas Drummond rode past Agnes Lindqvist's cabin every week from August to February, watching for the woodpile that never appeared. "She's not cutting," he told the men at the general store in September. "I've been watching. No wood stacked, no logs split, nothing. The woman's given up." "Maybe she's buying it," someone suggested. "With what money? Henrik left her nothing but debt and 80 acres of stumps. She can't afford to buy wood." Drummond smiled, the smile of a man counting his profits before they arrived. "I give her until January, February at the latest. Then she'll come to me, hat in hand, begging me to take the land off her hands." He rode past in October and saw the same thing. No woodpile. He rode past in November and saw the same thing. No woodpile. He rode past in December when the first real snow was falling, and every other cabin in the county had a wall of split logs stacked outside. And he saw the same thing. No woodpile. "She's mad," he declared at the store. "Or she's planning to freeze. Either way, that land will be mine by spring." But Agnes Lindqvist wasn't mad, and she wasn't planning to freeze. She was doing something that none of her neighbors had thought to do, something that old Birgitta had taught her in the weeks after Henrik died, something that would keep her warm all winter, while Silas Drummond watched her yard and waited for her to fail. Henrik Lindqvist had died in July, crushed when a tree he was felling twisted and fell the wrong direction. They had been married for 2 years, clearing land, building a life, turning 80 acres of Iowa forest into a farm that might someday support a family. He had died before they could have children, before the cabin was finished, before any of the dreams they had shared could become real. Agnes had buried him beside the creek, in a spot where the wildflowers grew thick in spring. And then she had sat down to calculate what it would take to survive the winter alone. The numbers were brutal. 20 cords of wood, minimum, to heat the cabin through an Iowa winter. She could cut perhaps 2 cords herself before the first snow, working alone, using tools designed for a man's hands. The rest she would have to buy at $4 a cord, money she didn't have and couldn't earn fast enough. She was considering selling the land, not to Drummond, never to Drummond, but to someone, when old Birgitta appeared at her door with a basket of bread and a question that changed everything. "Where are you going to store your wood?" Agnes looked at the old Swedish woman, not understanding. "Outside. Where else would I store it? In Sweden, we stored wood underground, in cellars, in pits, in caves dug into hillsides." Birgitta set down her basket and looked around the property, her silver hair catching the July sun. "Your wood gets wet out here. Rain, snow, ice. Wet wood burns poorly, gives less heat, makes more smoke. Underground, the wood stays dry. Always dry, and it's already near the cabin, so you don't have to carry it through snowdrifts when the blizzard comes." "I don't have a cellar." "Then you dig one. You have until winter. That's 4 months. You can dig a cellar in 4 months. Stay with me, because what old Birgitta taught her is the reason Agnes had 30 cords of bone-dry wood when February came, and everyone else was burning wet logs that hissed and smoked and gave half the heat they should have. The excavation took most of August and September. Agnes dug by daylight 6 days a week, carving a chamber out of the earth behind her cabin. The soil was Iowa clay, heavy but workable, and she moved it shovel by shovel, bucket by bucket, pile by pile. The main chamber was 20 feet long, 10 feet wide, and 8 feet deep, large enough to hold 40 cords of wood if she stacked it carefully. The walls were shored with timber she salvaged from trees Henrik had felled before he died, creating a wooden shell inside the earthen cavity that would hold its shape through years of use. The entrance was a tunnel sloping down from ground level to the floor of the chamber, wide enough to drag a sledge of logs through. She lined the tunnel with flat stones from the creek, creating a surface that would drain water away from the storage area instead of letting it pool. The ventilation was critical. Old Birgitta had been clear about this. Wood stored underground without airflow would rot, would mold, would become useless. So Agnes dug a second shaft on the far side of the chamber, a narrow chimney rising to the surface, covered with a wooden cap that kept rain out but let air circulate. The air entered through the tunnel, passed over the stacked wood, and exited through the ventilation shaft, keeping everything dry. She finished the excavation in late September and began filling it immediately. She couldn't cut 30 cords herself, but she didn't need to. Henrik had felled dozens of trees in the months before he died, leaving them where they lay, planning to cut them up when he had time. Now Agnes cut them, one log at a time, splitting what she could and stacking what she couldn't, dragging everything down the tunnel into the underground chamber. She worked through October, racing against the calendar. She traded labor for logs, helping neighbors with their harvest in exchange for wood they had already cut. She bought 10 cords at $3 each from a man who needed cash more than fuel, paying with money she had saved for spring seeds. She scavenged deadfall from the forest, dry branches and fallen limbs that would burn fast but hot. By November 1st, she had 32 cords of wood stored underground, stacked in rows that reached almost to the ceiling, bone dry and waiting. She sealed the tunnel entrance with a heavy wooden door, fitted tight, insulated with straw. From outside, there was nothing to see. No woodpile, no logs, no indication that she had any fuel at all. Just a cabin with a thin trail of smoke rising from the chimney, and a widow who was supposed to be freezing. Silas Drummond came to visit in early December, riding up to her cabin with the expression of a man delivering bad news he was secretly pleased to deliver. "Mrs. Lindqvist," he said, not dismounting, "I've noticed you have no wood stored for winter." Agnes was outside, carrying water from the well. She set down her bucket and looked up at him, her pale gray eyes giving nothing away. "Have you?" "Everyone in the county has noticed. They're worried about you. I'm worried about you." His face arranged itself into an expression of concern that didn't reach his eyes. "I'd like to help. I'll give you $300 for your land, right now. You can go back east, find your family, start over somewhere that doesn't require you to survive alone." "That's very generous, Mr. Drummond." "It's practical. You have no wood. You have no husband. You have no future here." He leaned forward in his saddle, the concern dropping away to reveal something colder beneath. "Take the money, Agnes. Take it before January, when you'll be begging me for half as much." Agnes picked up her water bucket and started walking toward her cabin. "I appreciate your concern, but I'm not selling. You'll freeze. Maybe," she didn't turn around, "or maybe I won't. Either way, it's not your concern." Drummond rode away, and Agnes went inside, where her stove was burning wood that was bone dry and hot, feeding a fire that could have run for 3 years on what she had stored beneath her feet. The winter of 1854 to 1855 was one of the worst in Iowa history. The temperature dropped to 30 below in January and stayed there for 3 weeks. The snow piled up in drifts that buried fences and blocked roads. People burned through their wood piles at alarming rates. The wood was wet from sitting outside in snow and rain, and wet wood burned fast but gave little heat. By February, half the county was in trouble. Families who had stacked 20 cords in October found themselves down to 5, the remaining logs wet and hissing, barely keeping their cabins above freezing. Men made desperate trips to the forest, cutting green wood that burned even worse than wet wood, producing smoke and steam but almost no warmth. Silas Drummond sent his men to check on Agnes Lindqvist in mid-February, expecting to find her half frozen, ready to accept whatever price he offered for her land. What they found instead was a cabin with a steady plume of smoke rising from the chimney, a widow in a warm wool dress answering the door, and the smell of bread baking in an oven that required heat to run. "Mr. Drummond wants to know if you're alive," one of the men said, his voice uncertain. "As you can see, he wants to know where your wood is coming from." Agnes smiled, the first smile she had shown anyone since Henrik died. "Would you like to see?" She led them around the cabin to the sealed entrance of her underground storage. She pulled open the heavy door, revealing the tunnel that sloped down into darkness, and gestured for them to follow. They descended into the earth, the temperature rising as they went, the air dry and still. At the bottom, they emerged into the chamber she had dug 6 months before, and they stopped and stared. The wood was stacked in rows that reached toward the ceiling, 30 cords or more, dry as kindling, waiting to be burned. There was no snow on it. There was no ice. There was no wet, no rot, no moisture of any kind. Just cord after cord of bone-dry fuel, enough to heat a cabin for 2 winters, stored in a chamber that nobody had known existed. "How?" one of the men asked. "I dug it last summer, before the first snow." Agnes walked along the rows of stacked wood, running her hand over logs that were as dry as they had been in October. "Above ground, wood gets wet. Wet wood burns poorly. Underground, wood stays dry. Dry wood burns hot and long. It's not complicated." "But no one does this. No one stores wood underground." "In Sweden, everyone does it. Old Birgitta taught me. Her grandmother taught her. It's not a secret. It's just something people here haven't thought to do." The men returned to Silas Drummond and told him what they had found. They described the underground chamber, the rows of dry wood, the widow who had spent her summer digging while everyone else assumed she was giving up. They described the smile on her face when she showed them the tunnel, the particular satisfaction of someone who had been underestimated and had proven everyone wrong. Drummond came himself the next day, riding up to the cabin with an expression that was no longer smug, no longer certain. He found Agnes outside, splitting logs she had just brought up from underground, her breath fogging in the cold air while she worked. "I want to see it," he said. "See what?" "The cellar, the underground storage. I want to see how much wood you have." Agnes set down her axe and looked at him, her pale gray eyes as unreadable as ever. "Why? Are you still hoping I'll sell?" "I want to understand. I've been buying up homesteads for 20 years. I've watched dozens of widows fail, dozens of families give up. You should have been one of them. You should have been out of wood by Christmas, begging me for help by January, gone by February." He dismounted, which he almost never did, and stood facing her at her own level. "Instead, you have more wood than I do. How?" "I dug a hole and filled it with logs. It's not complicated, Mr. Drummond. It just takes work." "Show me." She showed him. She led him down the tunnel, into the chamber, past the rows of stacked wood that should have been impossible for a widow alone to accumulate. She showed him the ventilation shaft, the stone-lined floor, the timber-reinforced walls. She showed him everything, because she had nothing to hide and nothing to fear, and because she wanted him to understand exactly how thoroughly he had underestimated her. Drummond walked the length of the chamber, counting cords, calculating value. When he reached the far wall, he turned and looked at her with something that might have been respect. "You did this alone?" "I had help with the digging. Old Birgitta's son came for a few days. But the planning was mine. The work was mine. The wood is mine." "I'll give you $600 for the land." "No." "800. "No." "1,000. That's more than this land is worth, more than Henrik paid for it." "I know what it's worth, Mr. Drummond. I know what I've built here, and I'm not selling. Not to you, not to anyone." Agnes walked to the tunnel entrance and gestured for him to leave. "You can go now, and you can stop riding past my cabin, counting the woodpile that isn't there. I have everything I need, and I don't need anything from you." He left without another word. He didn't come back. And when spring arrived, he was the one buying wood at premium prices. His own pile exhausted from a winter he had expected to be the end of Agnes Lindqvist, and had instead been the end of his assumptions. Old Birgitta died in the summer of 1855, peacefully, in the cabin her son had built for her 20 years before. Agnes was with her at the end, holding her hand, thanking her for the knowledge that had saved her life. "Just passing it on," the old woman said. "My grandmother taught me. I taught you. Now you teach others. That's how these things work." Agnes taught others. She showed her neighbors the underground chamber, explained the principles, helped them dig their own storage cellars before the following winter. By 1860, half the farms in the county had underground wood storage, and the wet wood desperation of February 1855 was a memory that people told stories about but didn't repeat. She remarried in 1857, a carpenter named Eric Holmberg, who had come to see her underground storage and stayed to help her expand it. Together, they built the chamber larger, adding a second entrance, creating a system that could hold 50 cords of bone-dry wood through any winter Iowa could produce. They raised 4 children in the cabin that Agnes had saved from Silas Drummond, all of them growing up knowing that the best way to prepare for winter was to go underground, to store what you needed where the weather couldn't reach it, to do the work in summer that would keep you warm in February. Silas Drummond died in 1868, having never successfully bought Agnes's land. His estate was divided among his children, none of whom had his talent for acquisition, and the Drummond empire slowly fragmented while the farms he had tried to swallow continued to thrive. The original underground chamber is gone now, collapsed decades ago, the timber rotted and the earth reclaimed. But the principle survives, and somewhere in Iowa there are probably still farmers storing their firewood underground, keeping it dry through the wet months, burning fuel in February that their neighbors would have thought impossible. Agnes Lindqvist Holmberg lived until 1901, dying at the age of 72 on the land she had refused to sell. Her obituary mentioned her children, her grandchildren, her long life on the farm she had built with 2 husbands. It didn't mention Silas Drummond, or the missing woodpile, or the 30 cords of bone-dry wood that had kept her alive when everyone expected her to freeze. But the people who knew the story kept telling it, and the people who heard it kept passing it on. The widow with no woodpile, the chamber beneath the ground, the man who counted her logs from horseback and never thought to look under her feet. Some stories end with the protagonist defeating the villain. This one ends with something drier, a woman who dug a hole and filled it with wood, who let her neighbors assume she was failing while she prepared to succeed, who survived not by asking for help, but by doing the work before she needed it. If this story of underground storage resonated with you, consider subscribing for more narratives of hidden preparation. What is the woodpile that everyone thinks you don't have? And where have you buried it?